Japan's transition from completely shutting out the West to embracing Western culture and becoming a global power is an intriguing shift. After World War II, Japan rose from a defeated Axis power to an economic superpower in under 30 years. But this was not the first time Japan had risen to meet the dominance of the West. After its 265-year self-isolation during the Edo period, Japan quickly transformed itself so it would be able to meet the European powers on their own terms. This period of internal development is known as the Meiji period and was Japan's first step to becoming a global force. To explore how Japan achieved this, we first have to go back to a time when it shut out external influence. In 1492, the age of exploration began in earnest when Christopher Columbus attempted to find a shorter passage to the East Indies. So began a mad scramble in which the European powers tried to discover more countries they could easily exploit. Soon, Portuguese and Spanish ships began establishing trade routes to Asia, including the Philippines and Japan. From the late 1400s to around the turn of the 17th century, Japan was suffering social upheavals and civil wars. It was known as the Sengoku period, and during this time, modern weapons had been introduced through trade negotiations with Portuguese merchant ships. The civil wars ended when Toyotomi Hideyoshi managed to subdue or ally with the warring factions. Hideyoshi implemented many reforms, including prohibiting peasants from using weapons, freezing class distinctions, and rigidly separating each class, both figuratively and literally. 2 years after Hideyoshi's death, a shogun named Tokugawa Ieyasu took power and founded a military government. Tokugawa Ieyasu quickly secured his rule. One of his edicts was that Japan should enter a period of self-isolation. The closing of the Japanese ports was mainly due to the perceived threat of foreign merchants and the ongoing spread of Christianity, which was seen as a threat to the stability of the Tokugawa shogunate rule. For over 260 years, most people were not permitted to enter or leave Japan. The only contact they had with foreign powers through this time was limited contact with Dutch merchants, as the Dutch were not seen to be pushing their religion on the populace in the same way as the Portuguese. Even so, the Dutch were confined to a small artificial island called Dejima, which was located in Nagasaki's harbor. Many now believe that this period enabled Japan to solidify its traditional culture, which may have otherwise faded out. During the Tokugawa period, arts and crafts boomed, leading to the formation of a wealthy merchant class that profited from an increase in products and trade. In contrast, the primary income of the ruling samurai and daimyo was linked to agriculture, which had not increased alongside the other sectors. In addition to financial issues, the shogunate had to deal with samurai unrest and peasant uprisings. Their troubles increased when the Americans began trying to force Japan to open up to trade. In 1853, a naval commander named Matthew Perry, who had become convinced that Japan would never respond to diplomacy alone, sailed his ships into the harbor of Uraga. He felt that a show of stubborn force would be the only way to open communications with the Japanese rulers, and he was right. After the Japanese realized their defenses would never hold up against the American ships, they agreed to take a look at the treaty being offered by the US. The Japanese rulers were also aware of the West's recent defeat of China after the First Opium War and decided the best course of action would be to stall and agree to Perry's demands while they reinforced their defenses. However, the signing of the US trade agreements only opened the door to other Western nations seeking the same thing, and soon Japan was forced to sign similar trade agreements with several Western powers, which was the final nail in the coffin of the shogunate. In 1868, a political revolution led by the samurai and nobles overthrew the military government and reintroduced imperial rule. They installed Mutsuhito, remembered as Emperor Meiji, as Japan's ruler. Despite a brief civil war, the last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, surrendered to imperial forces in June 1869. The young samurai were inspired to act because of the increasing domestic problems and the rising threat of encroachment from the West. The new government adopted the slogan, "Enrich the country, strengthen the army," and knew their only way of resisting the West was to try and gain an equal footing and meet the West on its own terms. In order to do this, they needed more knowledge of Western society, including modern science, technology, and industrialization. Japan focused on bringing the unsettled country together so it could make a concerted effort to modernize and put itself in a position to trade with the West while staving off Western imperialism. They moved their capital from Kyoto to Edo, which was renamed Tokyo, and began to dismantle the traditional feudal regime. The Japanese went to great lengths to unite the country, abolishing class privileges, forming a national army in 1871, and adding national conscription in 1873. They also unified the monetary and tax systems, creating new revenues for the government. They then increased the country's knowledge of the West by relaxing laws that banned Western books and encouraging scholars to study Western languages and expertise. Because of this, Japanese officials were able to better negotiate with the Western powers. In 1871, the Japanese government established its first Ministry of Education and introduced universal education the following year. Much of the learning was based on Western ideas in order to enable the country to compete on the global stage. Despite the successes of the new regime, the reforms were not welcomed by everyone in Japan. The samurai did not overthrow the oppressive Tokugawa shogunate so that their country could embrace Western culture, especially at the expense of the samurai themselves. One such samurai was Saigo Takamori. Saigo had become a legendary hero due to his role in the restoration of the imperialists, as he had led the troops that, on January 3, 1868, had taken control of the palace gates, leading to the reinstallment of the emperor. Saigo retired immediately afterward and refused to participate in the new government, even after being offered the highest honors by the emperor. Despite his resistance, Saigo was tempted out of retirement in 1871 when he was put in command of 10,000 troops that made up the new Imperial Guard. Saigo was also appointed to the Council of State and helped the imperial government eliminate any potential military opposition to their rule, including the feudal Han system. By the summer of 1872, Saigo had become a full general, although there was already a divide forming between the government and the samurai. With a rise in interest in European social practices, some members of the government wanted to implement military conscription. However, this went against the Japanese traditions, in which the warrior class of samurai was predominantly responsible for warfare. While many believe that privately Saigo supported conscription, he never declared it openly. This event was probably the start of Saigo's separation from the government, and many began to believe that Japan was losing its traditions too rapidly. Saigo knew that the samurai were feeling increasingly rebellious due to the ongoing modernization and the Conscription Act. He reasoned that war would be the only way to reinvigorate the samurai. Since Korea had refused to recognize the Meiji government, with many feeling this was a grievous insult, Saigo pushed for the samurai to attack Korea. As he knew that they would need justification to wage open war on the country, he suggested that he travel to Korea and provoke the Koreans into murdering him. Japan would then be able to declare war on Korea justifiably. Although Saigo insisted that his dearest desire was to give up his life for his country, the government leaders ultimately ruled that they needed to focus on internal developments rather than a foreign war. The ruling made Saigo resign from his governmental positions, which in turn inspired several high-ranking officials and over 100 officers to resign as well. Saigo returned to his home in Kagoshima and opened a private school specializing in physical training and military science. Samurai from across Japan came to study under Saigo, which became a worry for the government in the face of samurai uprisings in other parts of the country. Fueled by paranoia, the government tried to assert its authority over the Kagoshima school. Their plan completely backfired and ignited more tensions, leading to some of Saigo's students attacking the Kagoshima arsenal and navy yard. Saigo never intended to rebel against the government. Yet when he returned from a hunting trip to find his disciples operating the arsenal and preparing themselves for military action, he agreed to become the rebellion's leader. War broke out in 1877, but the rebellion was ultimately quashed. Saigo was critically wounded on September 24, 1877, and the man that would be known as the Last Samurai was beheaded at his own behest by his most faithful lieutenant. The government's conscripted army had defeated the samurai, and Japan's march toward voluntary westernization continued unabated. Despite his defeat, Saigo became a legend, with many believing he did not die but was waiting for the proper time to re-emerge and lead the samurai to victory. During this time, Japan was split between those who wanted to maintain their traditional society and those who had been influenced by the introduction of Western ideas. While Japan quickly became industrialized, by the 1880s there was a renewed appreciation for traditional Japanese values. So Japan began to reconcile new Western ideas with old ideals. Inspired by Western liberalism, a growing popular rights movement called for the formation of a constitutional government. In 1881, the government responded by promising a constitution by the end of the decade. True to their word, in 1889, the Meiji Constitution was presented to the Japanese people as a gift from the emperor. The constitution, mainly written by statesman Ito Hirobumi, established an elected bipartite parliament named the Teikoku Gikai. In 1890, the government enacted the Imperial Rescript on Education, which began reintroducing traditional Japanese values and artistic techniques. Thanks to their extended period of isolation, the Japanese people were able to retain their heritage while becoming a modern industrialized country. Comparisons are often drawn between the fate of China and the success of Japan. The common view is that while Japan embraced Western culture in order to maintain its sovereignty, China tried to resist Westernization, which resulted in catastrophe. This simplified observation is not entirely accurate. Many scholars cite the fact that Japan was able to see how the West outgunned and outmaneuvered China through false diplomacy and underhanded tactics during the Opium Wars. The Japanese knew they were facing a formidable foe, and that they would have to learn more about the ways of the West in order to deal with them better. In contrast, China had no such reference point, so they stuck to their guns. It is likely that Japan's initial isolation and their limited dealings with the Dutch enabled them to observe the tactics of the Western powers and better prepared themselves to face this new adversary. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about modern Japanese history, check out our book, Modern Japan, a captivating guide to modern Japanese history, starting from the period of the Tokugawa Shogunate through the Meiji era and Imperial to the present. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.